Hello DIYers, I'm Nikki. This is my first video, so bear with me. I've had a few people request after I showed the picture of my windmill, which is this little guy right here, that I show you guys how I made it out of trash pieces. So I'm going to do my best. Like I said, bear with me, and I will start off now. Alright? Okay, so what you're going to need are two 16-ounce plastic bottles. Mine are Dr. Pepper, but it doesn't really matter because you're only going to be using this center section here. So you'll need two of these. You'll need one of those spiral thingies from the Dollar Tree. I've already cut mine, so I can't really show you. You know, they open up kind of round like that, but you'll need one of those, or a part of one of those. You're going to need 4 shish kebab skewers. Once again, you can get these at the Dollar Tree or grocery store or wherever. You're going to need a cap to a milk bottle. You know, just any standard size plastic cap. If you don't have one available, you can use like a double thickness of foam core around the same size, and this is 1.5 inches wide, so you know that's the kind of measurement you are going to need. If you're going to mount this on a board like I did my home sign, you're going to need a popsicle stick, which we will cut up. And then you also need spray paints. I used silver spray paint. I used elephant chalk paint and a little bit of Elmer's glue and cinnamon to make it look rusty. As far as your other tools you'll need a straight edge, a pair of scissors, an X-Acto knife, a fine line magic marker, a sharp pointy object. I have a picker, but you can use a nail, anything like that. A small piece of sandpaper, a pair of heavy duty wire cutters. This is to cut your spiral thing. So they need to be a little on the heavy duty because this is hardened metal. And then obviously you'll need your glue gun and glue sticks. And then I use a candle with my lighter because that's what I'm going to use to heat up my sharp object to melt holes in the plastic. So it's just easier than trying to hold a lighter for long periods of time. So those are all the tools you're going to need. So let's get started. Alright, so the first thing you're going to need is, I make myself a template. This is just a little piece of cardstock I have. And your template's going to be 3 inches tall by 1 inch at the bottom and 1.5 inch at the top. This is your blade. You're going to be cutting this out of this. So I'm going to show you how I do one, and then I'll skip ahead and continue on. So first things first, you just want to carefully, with a very sharp X-Acto knife, cut open your bottle. You just want the flat part. You don't need the top or the bottom. You can use those for another project or put those in the recycling bin, whatever works for you. And then the first thing I like to do is, just to make this easier to work with, is where the label is, and you can't get that sticky off, I like to cut that out, just so there's no chance of that popping up in my project. Now, let me dry this off a little. You're going to lay this out, and I like to square mine up a little bit just to make it easier. If you have a straight bottom, then you always have something to line up your template on. So just take that out. Now this can get a little cumbersome, but as long as you have your straight edge, you're good. So then you're gonna take your template. And the reason I ended up going with the bottle on this was because it had the curve that I needed for my blades. I kept looking at all these videos of the ones that people had made using cardboard and tin foil pans and all sorts of stuff. And the one thing that they were all lacking was the curve in the blades. So you're going to do this. You're going to end up needing 2 bottles for this. And you're going to cut out 8 of these. Don't worry about that because we're going to take care of the magic marker line later. And when I get this all done, I'll come right back. Okay, all done with that. I cut up my 2 bottles and I have 8 blades. They're hard to see because they're clear plastic, but we're going to take care of that right now. So because these edges are a little sharp and that's not what I want to deal with, that's why you need your sandpaper. So just take a little piece of sandpaper. I think this is 60 grit, which is pretty heavy duty, but I don't like to work very hard on this. So you're just going to knock the corners off so they're not so sharp because this will cut you. And just give them a little, file down. You can use a nail file for this. Anything you have on hand. It just makes it a little rounder than trying to cut it with scissors, because if you're doing this along with me, you'll notice it's hard enough to cut a straight line because it keeps trying to curl up on you. So you're just going to knock down all the corners, and then what I'm going to do is once I knock down all the corners, then just on the top curve part of it, I'm going to give it a little scratch up with, the sandpaper. That way, when I go to paint it later, it'll stick better. And it also helps give it that more of a rustic farmhouse feel to it. So you just want to make sure you get all the edges and everything real good with the sandpaper. Then it's a little easier to see as well. Sorry if I'm out of frame. So you're just going to give it a little sand on all 8 of your pieces and then come on back. Okay, now that that's all done, you have 8 blades that have a rough surface and no sharp corners, and you're all set for the next step. So, next step is we are going to take our shish kebab skewers, which, if I remember correctly, they're just under 10 inches. So, let me see. I think these I cut down to, these are 3 1/4 inches. So that's why you only need 4. So we're just gonna give these a little cut down. And like I said, it doesn't have to be exact, but these are the measurements I used on the first one. So that one open up. So 3 1/4. Just going to make a mark on all of them at around 3 1/4. And then we needed to go another 3 1/4. So 1, 2, 3 1/4. Come on. 1, 2, 3 1/4. Here we go. It gives you a nice mark, and then you can just go back with your scissors because these don't need to be perfectly clean or anything like that. They just, there we go. At my mark. There. Sorry, I'm keep getting out of frame. Not used to doing this. So sometimes you get one that's really tough. So if you just make a notch in it, you can break them apart. This one does not want to cut, but that's okay. There. All right, so now you have 8 sticks that are roughly 3 1/4 inches. So because this is plastic, you kind of have to be careful when you're hot gluing to the back of this. So, and if you look at the back of my piece, it goes from here to here. So exactly halfway is where you want the end of your blade to be. So I'm just going to mark 1 5/8 on them. And if you line them all up, like I said, it doesn't have to be exact. It's all pretty close. 1 5/8. And give them a mark. Now, if you look on the original as well, I kept them all to one side. That way they give a turn in and you have a way to feed your wire into it once we burn these holes. So we're going to put the glue on the stick, not on the blade, because you don't want to warp your blade. Let it cool for 2-3 seconds, and then you're going to attach it to your blade. Just like this. So make sure you're attaching your stick to the same side of all the blades. This is not my usual hot glue gun. My usual one is all gross and disgusting, so, and I usually go about 1/4 inch from this point in and set it aside. You're going to be gluing it on the skinny end. So just keep doing that for all of them. This way it doesn't warp the plastic. It's the only bad side about working with plastic and hot glue guns is you got to be careful, because if you were to put the hot glue directly on the plastic, it'll bubble and warp your plastic. See, and I'm right at my line. So you're going to do that for all 8 of them, which I'm going to get that done real quick. And then we'll move on to our milk cap. Every time I've done a project with somebody and I bring out my hot glue gun and my little holder, they're like, where did you get that holder? And my grandfather, who has since passed away, when I was young, knew I loved crafting. So he made this for me. And it's just some plywood that he stained and a random floor tile. And it's got a little notch in it that holds my glue gun. And this little sticker that he put on it. But yeah, he handmade that for me. Oh gosh, years and years ago. And I just absolutely adore it. So let's finish these last few blades. 2 more. One more to go. Alright, and there's all 8 of my windmill blades, and we'll just set those aside for right now and get to working on our milk cap. Now, like I said before, milk caps are roughly 1.5 inches. wide, and they usually have these little marks. So you have a starting point from where there used to be attached to the little tabs, so you can get a center line, which makes things so much easier. And if you have a grid mat like this, it's 100 times easier. So I just line up my 2 marks that I have here on my grid. Sorry if top of my head gets in the shot. And I eyeball it so it looks like it's in the center of my big square. And then, because this doesn't have to be exact, I just mark the other 2. Now, once again, I'm eyeballing because that's just easier for me. And pretty close. If you feel more comfortable, you can trace the circle on a piece of paper and fold the piece of paper to get your marks. But I don't know if you can see that, but I have little marks all around. You need 8 of them, and that'll just help you when you go to melt the holes, which will be our next step. So let me light my candle here. Get this going. And then I have my sharp object. Now, if you're going to use a nail, my suggestion is to wrap the handle in a little bit of like masking tape or something, or pick it up with a piece of paper towel. You don't want to be holding onto metal when you're getting it hot because it does travel down the shaft. This one actually has a separated handle so it doesn't travel, so I don't ever have a problem with that. Let me get you a little bit more in frame. So I just hold this over the fire until I feel it's hot enough. You don't want, it doesn't need to be like glowing orange or anything like that. And then where your mark is, you're just going to go down and pop a hole. And you're going to do that all the way around. Being sure not to stab yourself in the finger with the hot pokey object. So I try and do it right in the center. Some people can do this with their hot glue gun and punch the holes. I just find this takes a lot less effort. And shish kebab skewers are not very round, and the tip of my hot glue gun is not very pointy, so you don't want to make the holes so big. So once you get all that, then I got all my holes. Set that aside because we're going to be using that again, so you don't need to get rid of that right now. Then, because my little pokey thing isn't that big, then I go in with my X-Acto knife and I just give it a couple twists and carve out some of that extra until my stick fits in there. You can use a drill bit if you want. I just found this was easier. So you're going to go around, and that melty plastic that sits on the top, you're just going to carve that off. And keep going around. Sorry about the background noise. My daughter is home from school today. They were doing an optional field trip that she opted out of and decided to stay home with me today. So she's in the other room doing whatever teenagers do when they don't have to go to school. So, almost done. And I think I've got all of them done. Now, if you want to, if you have any stray burrs or anything, you can go back with that sandpaper and clean that up, but I pretty much got most of it with the X-Acto knife. So, now, looking at the back, you're going to just feed your blades in just almost to the center. And if you feel like you want to be more perfectionist, which I usually am, and I think on my first one I did, I measured, I think it was a 1/2 inch from the end on this, and that's where I stuck it in. This time I think I may just eyeball it. So let me try not to stick my hand in my candle flame. Once again, this is from the back, so you want to make sure that your blades are all facing down. You can see the hot glued skewer on the back. Get these last two in here. Okay, and last one. Okay. Once you get it in and you're pretty sure you've got the direction, you know, they're all spaced out where you like them, and you don't have some shorter than others. I think this looks right. My spacing is all pretty good. Then you're just gonna go and hot glue your heart out. So I like to put a line of a lot around the edge. Sorry if my hand's in the way. And then a big glob where they all meet, right in the middle. Just like that. So everything's in there nice and tight. You want to make sure that your blades are more curved up. So you kind of want the wood skewer part to be flatter to the table, like this. So give them a little turn so they're curved up, like that. This way, when we go to put our holes for our wire, they're facing the right direction. So, and you just want to hold that until your hot glue sets nicely, which may be a few minutes, because even though I have a extreme low temp mini hot glue gun at the moment, it's still taking its sweet time. So I'm going to set this, well, we'll leave it right here for right now. Now you're going to take your little spiral slinky thing that they had up at the dollar store, and in its natural circle, here, I'm going to slide this over here for a second. In its natural circle, you want to cut a slightly overlapping circle. You don't want to stretch this out or make it too skinny, okay? So this is where my end is, so I'm going to cut over here, and we can trim the excess later if we need, but if my clippers will work, once I do that, then you can just break it off. And you can save the rest of that for another project. I'm sure I'll come up with something for it. Now you can stretch these out a little bit more or make them a little bit tighter, but the more you stretch it out, the more wonky it gets. So we don't want to go too crazy. So we're going to bring this back, which is almost completely dry. And with holding your edges where you think you want them to overlap, I'm going to actually stretch mine out a little bit. I think I cut mine a little too short. I'm going to cut another piece and make it a little bit longer because I want it to come about 1 inch down from my pieces. So let me cut another piece real quick. I'll use that for something else. Maybe I'll make a smaller one. So I'm just going to quickly cut a much longer one. There we go. Now, yeah, we're good and dry now. So I'm going to flip this over. And then using my piece, going to stretch it out until it meets the circle I like, which I think I'm going to go with right about there. So then, once I get it set on top, let me get my lid off my marker here, and you don't want to glue this together yet. You will, just not now. You get it laid out to where it's pretty centered. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to end up cutting a hole, melting a hole actually on this side. So I'm going to flip this guy over because it's going to be easier to make my marks closer to the hole. So you just eyeball it where it looks like it's about centered, and then I'm going to go through and I'm just going to make little marks where I would like them to be. Okay, so when I have one mark done, set that aside and use my little ruler straight edge that I have here. And I did 1 inch down. So I'm just gonna go around this way. It's exactly. I'm gonna go around. Why is my pen? There we go. Not working. Okay, 1 inch down on the back side of your blade on the curve. So your skewers on this side, let's see if I can get this in here. Your skewers on this side and your marks on this side. Okay? So 1 inch, 1 inch, okay, now that I have those, now we're going to go back to our little melting tool. So, bring my candle back over here. I'm going to try and do this so you can see it. I'm going to do it on this side so because you guys can see here. Okay, so there's my little line, and you can just eyeball the measurement from the edge. You don't want it to be super close to the edge, but you don't want it to be in the middle of the blade. So I'm just melting up or heating up my tip a little bit, and then I'm going to poke it. I guess I didn't heat it up enough. Let's try this again. And put it in. See, this is the hard part about doing this when it's not facing me, I'm not looking at it. So let's, third time's a charm. Now, if this makes you nervous doing anything with fire or melting things, you can use an X-Acto knife. I just found that I get a more precise melt and cut doing it this way. And you kind of want to make it into a slit, because if you notice your little thingy here, it's a flat piece of it's a little wider than and thinner and flat, so you want this to fit in a slot like this. Okay, so I think I need to make this a little bit longer. And when you're done, that excess scratches right off, and you have a nice little slit in your piece. Let me see if I can get this. Okay? And you're going to do that to all your marks, and that way this will slide right through. Okay? So I'm going to do that real quick, and then I will come right back. Okay, so I have melted all my little slots in all my blades all the way around. So now we're going to feed our piece of springy thingy into it. So you just start at any blade, and you're just going to feed it around. Until you've got it through all the blades. And like I said, because we are making it a little bit bigger round than the original spring was intended. It's a little tight, and you want to take it slow because you don't want to break anything. And just feed it in here. Okay, so you get all the way around through all your blades. Do this one this way. Okay, so then just feed it around, and then where you are going to glue your two pieces together, I just like to do it behind a blade so it's not so super visible. So just a little bit of hot glue in your other piece, and you're just going to hold it there. Shouldn't take too long because this is metal, and if you do a lot of DIYs, you know that metal and hot glue cures very quickly. Once it's done, you can take your X-Acto knife and trim any of the excess off. You can put a piece of like tape around it because it's all going to get spray painted, so no one's going to see it. I just left the hot glue and it seemed to hold just fine. So just like that. And there's your basic windmill. Now I'm going to go and I'm going to give this a spray paint of bright silver spray paint. I believe I have the Rust-Oleum because it was 20% more in the can for the same price as the Krylon. I got it at Walmart. I think it was like $4.38 or something, and I use it for so many things. Anything I want to end up rusting starts with a base of silver. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and once it dries, I'll come back and I'll show you how we finish this up. Okay, now we're back, and I've given it a nice coat of the silver spray paint. Didn't really worry about the back too much. You're not going to really see it. Because this is clear plastic, what does get seen, you can tell it just shows right up fine. So we're going to go ahead and do a little distressing on it. Now I use the Elephant chalk paint. I have it in this container because I broke the lid on the jar that it came in. But you can get them at Walmart. I think they're like $1.99 for the smaller bottles. So I just use the Elephant, and then I use these. It's almost like horsehair bristles. They're the cheapy ones, and sometimes the bristles come off, but they work really great if you're doing a, distressed look on anything. So I just get a little bit on the tip of my